Welcome to the Priestess of Motherhood podcast. My name is Dania Foster. I am a clinical naturopath and energetics therapist and a mum of three kids. Now, today I would love to talk to you about PDA. Now, PDA stands for Pathological Demand Avoidance, and I don't so much love that term. I am preferring to use terms such as pervasive drive for autonomy or persistent drive for autonomy. I feel like they're much more fitted for my approach for how I work with PDA and how we support our kids naturally. So I'm coming at this from a perspective of a mum and realizing that, yes, my kids are neurodivergent, and yes, we have elements of PDA that we work with every day in how we get our kids to do what we need them to do. And how that can be such a challenge for us as mums, because I have firsthand experienced the frustration and the absolute helplessness, especially when it's something around something that's going to benefit our kids or something that they want to do, but they just feel like they just collapse inside as soon as that's been asked of them. So this is what I want to address today from a perspective of motherhood, but also bringing in how I support people with this clinically as a naturopath and energetically as an energetics therapist. I weave all of these elements together in my work, and I want to show you what that looks like. So let's start off with like how it came up in my life. So for me, I noticed that especially my middle child, who is now 11, would really like, she was a wild one. She is always being so athletic. She's the cartwheeling one. She would always just be covered in mud when we'd go out when she was a toddler, stripping off naked wherever we were. Couldn't keep clothes on her, could never keep shoes on her. And she was just like cartwheeling everywhere, climbing trees. She got Kmart skates for her birthday one year. She was in the bowl at the skate park. She's just got, she doesn't have the fear that I have, or that my eldest, who is a bit more anxiously attached, would have. She was very gung ho into everything. But as soon as I showed some interest in what she was doing, so as an unschooling mom, trying to follow their interest and provide opportunities for them. She's athletic, she's cartwheeling, let's take her to acrobatics class. And here we are 10 minutes into the class, and there she goes storming out of the class. She's like, I'm never going back in there. And I'm like, what happened? What happened? She's like, they tried to make me stand on a dot. And that's like, how dare they? And she would not. So we sat out at the front of the class while her older sister did it, and she was cartwheeling in the grass. And she's like, I don't need them to tell me how to cartwheel. I've got this. Can't tell her anything. And I'm like, right, this is why we homeschool. This is what we're doing. And we would flex and bend around what her needs are. Okay, we had the same thing happen with skate lessons. She got these skates for her birthday. We were going to the netball courts, and she's getting her skills up, going to the skate rink. She's got her skills going well. She's zooming around, heading to the skate park, and she's loving all of the jumps and the ramps and everything like that. And we book her into some skate lessons. And she is on the sidelines screaming at me about having to put on a helmet, screaming at me about having to wear the knee pads that are required for the lessons and safety. And everything that I would try and talk around, she didn't want to wear shoes, but you're roller skating, you kind of got to wear shoes to roller skate. So everything that I would try and support her around, changing the skates, changing the pads, buying different ones, trying all of these different things, giving her free rein, going to the skate ramp without any instruction or direction or expectations is the big thing, is when she would shine. But as soon as there was any expectation, this is what you've been asked to do, this is what we're here to do, then there would be meltdowns. And she couldn't tell us why. And she really wanted to do it. This was like, I'm like, do you even want to skate? Do you want to do this? Like, you don't seem like you want to do it because you're having this meltdown every time and you're screaming at me. She's like, I do want to do it. She couldn't articulate what was happening within her body that was causing her to shut down. And I think that it started to peak at around 8 years old. Things started to get more intense, and there was a bit more expectation and compliments. This is where compliments started to be really, really difficult for her. Um, so anytime anybody commented on, oh, your hair is so beautiful, she would shut down and would not want to talk to that person anymore. There was an expectation put on her around that. Um, there was a compliment about her skating. Somebody jokingly said, you could go to the Olympics, you're so good. And she was like, no, I'm not skating anymore. Don't put that expectation on me, you know? And as soon as you make a comment, she would just shut down. So, what we need to understand is that this is not a behavioral issue. This is not something that we can go and do talk therapy around or even occupational therapies and try and find different ways to be able to do these things. It is a nervous system in survival mode. It is a nervous system feeling overwhelmed and going into shutdown. And what is triggering that nervous system to go into avoidance or shutdown is it's not allowing itself to have the full control that it wants. So if we think about the name of it, pathological demand avoidance, is that you have this pathological thinking pattern that any demand you're avoiding. Okay, so this is what we see when we say, like, a kid won't put on their shoes. My kid just won't put on their shoes. What is going on with my child? Anything I ask them, they just shut down. It's like I'm talking to a brick wall. They just go blank. I can see their eyes glaze over and they're no longer there. This is why this is such a scale. PDA is a scale. It's on the autism spectrum because it is a spectrum. It is a full scale. So the way that we work with our kids in this level is a very dependent on their particular story, their particular reaction, their particular nervous system, their body, and the way that they respond to different things. Some things will trigger them more than others. Some things will be okay, and some things will be a huge demand on their system. So if we think about it in the way that I like to call it is pervasive drive for autonomy, as an autonomous parent who wants to drive that autonomic drive for interest and things like that. That's why this fits a lot better for me. Pervasive drive for autonomy means that the child wants to be in control. The child wants to have full autonomy or choice over what they get to do without expectations, without pressure. And it is the pressure or the expectation that creates a nervous system response of fight, flight, freeze. So the fight is the reaction, the explosion, the yelling, the screaming. The flight is the avoidance, like the moving away from it, trying to do all of these other things, the distractions, all of that type of thing can be the flight response. And then the freeze response is that glazing over, that completely shutting down or ignoring what's happening. So there's many different ways that the nervous system can respond. And that's why I say it is a spectrum. Every child is going to be different. And that's why we approach them all differently. But we have to come at it from the same understanding that this is not a behavioral issue. This is a nervous system challenge. And so we need to support the nervous system to be able to feel safe. Because if the nervous system's in survival mode, everything that you try to do to help them is going to feel like an attack. Okay, so let's break it all down. So the PDA child has a very sensitive, a very reactive nervous system. So this is why I'm talking to the highly sensitive children, the parents of highly sensitive children, is that you feel like your child is so sensitive. They're reacting to so many things. They're going to perceive demands, even your loving, well-intentioned ones, as threats. So everyday tasks like putting on your shoes, like eat your breakfast, like drink your water, from the moment they wake up, they're perceiving this external world and assessing what feels like a threat to me. And that's why it's a spectrum of different kids are going to assess different things as different threats. So the other thing to recognize that these little threats or these little external expectations are accumulating, and it's a cumulative effect that cause the blowout. So that's why often, if your kids are in school or if your kids have afternoon activities, it'll be often in the afternoon or the dinner rush or the bedtime where you get the big explosions happening, where the system has just overflowed and there's no more space for any room to have any capacity for regulating that anymore. And the thing is, like, we as parents don't always understand why it's such a big deal if we've just asked them to, go and put their pajamas on or make sure they eat this for dinner, or that they're suddenly exploding. Okay. Feels like it comes out of nowhere, but really it's been building up to this point all day. Now, when I say that you may be making things worse with your well-intentioned support, I know that I was, because for me, being a mum who wanted to be able to give opportunities, like as I gave the example before, the acro lessons, the skate park lessons, things like that, wanting to provide opportunities. The other example that I have is that my child would not drink water all day because I had told her to make sure you drink your water. It's really hot today. And then she would, unbeknownst to me, not drink anything, like just pretend she's drinking and actually not drink. And I'm like, why are you doing this? Why are you being so self-sabotaging? You need water. Please drink your water. And everything that I would do to help her, she would push back on, avoid, or just completely ignore, until the point where she would explode. She'd have these meltdowns with headaches and feel so sick because she hasn't drunk anything all day and she's been active. And so here I am thinking, I'm a naturopath. I should be able to support my kid to drink her water. Like, what is going on? Um, running through all of the things that could be causing these big explosions at the end of the day, looking for things like heavy metals and zinc copper imbalances for mental health, looking at all of these different things that I was looking for. And what I realized was that my own attachment to this. See, I have an anxious attachment pattern. And so whenever I get anxious about anything, I latch onto it and just obsess over it. And as a mother, we do. And we want to make sure that they're drinking the water. So we will ask them over and over again. We will check in with them constantly to see, like, how are you feeling in this? What do you think about this? And I have to be so conscious in myself that every time I check in with her, it can be causing her to feel pressure. It can be causing her to feel an expectation from me that puts that pressure on her nervous system. So I have to deal with my own stuff coming up and step back a bit, step back from the anxious attachment and be there for her, but in a way that's not creating more pressure. So I really needed to manage my own anxiety about her reactivity. I had to rewire the story that I was telling myself about what her reactions meant about me as a mother, about me as a naturopath, about me being able to support her needs. I needed to have to really let go of some of those expectations that I had on myself as well. We were both in a threat response, and I didn't even realize it that I was in a threat response because I felt threatened by her reactivity. And so I get that your nervous system is just trying to keep your child safe and cared for, and that's so nurturing, so human. This is exactly what you want to be doing as a nurturing, present mother, especially when your child is having so many struggles, and if they are having these meltdowns or chaotic episodes, and you feel like, I just want to support you to do this thing that you love, or I just want you to be able to, drink your water or eat your veggies or your protein or whatever it is you're trying to get your kids to do. Take your supplements, please. I want you to know that I understand where you're coming from, and trying to help your kid through that is a struggle. And it's something that we got to work on together. Um, So what doesn't help is of course telling the kid what they have to do, giving those expectations or saying, go put your shoes on, do this, eat your veggies, make sure you drink your water. Like all of that sort of language is what we need to change. So what does work is, well, it depends, is a big thing to come into. And that's why every appointment is an individual consultation, and we're talking about what happens in your family, what happens with your child. Give me an example. And tell me what are the big triggers, because it's very individualized. This is a spectrum. What works for one may still be a higher level of demand for another. And so it's a really personal, family, individualized framework. And it's a journey, it's not a destination. It's about learning along the way. And that requires flexibility. It requires attunement to your child and their nervous system on that actual day. So, yes, as mothers, we are attuning to our children's energetic systems, their nervous systems, their emotional capacity every day, every minute. And that's exhausting. And that's why I support mums and children at the same time, because we need that support to be able to keep up with our kids' needs. So instead of telling our kids what to do, what do I find helps is, instead of saying, put your shoes on, I'll try. Your shoes are at the door. Would you like me to help you with that? One of my favorite phrases to help get my kids to tune into their own control, their own autonomous processing of the thing that needs to be thought through is, I wonder if. So posing it as a question can prompt them to come to their own conclusion about things. I wonder if it would work better for you if you stood up on your pedals while you were riding uphill on your bike. I wonder how that would work for you. And I said that the other day at the skate park to my son. And the first first instance was pushback is, no, that doesn't work. No, I've already tried that. That's not how it works for me. Like, oh, okay. I just was wondering. That's all. And then he goes and he's thinking about it, and you can see him tries it and sit back down. That's a bit weird. And then he tries it again. He's like, oh, maybe it did work a bit better. But there's no conversation about it. It's letting it go and giving it the space. And that's what my nervous system needed, was to be able to have the capacity to give it space and not harp on about it. Um, I've also noticed that prioritizing connection and trusting my kids has been key. And this is when I'm talking about it's a journey, not a destination, because this is a long-term processing of building connection and building trust, letting them come to their own conclusions, educating them on the reason why they should eat their vegetables, and having their protein, what it does for them, what it prevents, and then giving them the opportunity. Something that I have been running with since they have been little is it is my responsibility to provide them with the food, the opportunities, and it is their responsibility to take them on. I cannot force. And I know that, like, my middle daughter is my biggest example of this. I cannot force her to do anything. And I often joke that I'm forcing them to do martial arts at the moment because it's something that's really important to me. But the thing is that I could never force her. She would be walking out of that class if she didn't want to be there. So I know that she is invested as well. So we cannot force them to do anything. And there's a big part of my family is educating why it's important to me, what I think is needed by them, and letting them take on that responsibility, taking on that commitment themselves, that having the choice to take on that commitment and the choice to step up into that and support themselves through that is important. And that's been a long road to get there, but it's something that I've been building on them for a long time. I also know that in our family and in other families that I've supported, this is such a gradual shift, reducing the demands very incrementally, introducing rhythms and rituals to your month, week, day, morning, evening, little rituals in your morning routines or rhythms. are so much more supportive than routine. So it's this happens and this happens and this happens is a stable rhythm that the nervous system can feel safe within. And then your nervous system knows the pace of what your family's expectations are without having to think about it or having to feel threatened by that demand. So the demand doesn't feel like a threat anymore, or the expectation doesn't feel like a threat anymore. It feels like a safe pattern that feels stable and provides safety, not threat. So rhythms, rituals are so important in my family and in the work that I set my clients up with, is finding the rhythms and rituals that work for their family's flow. So how does this work with like eating? Is having set times for eating. We all come in to set the table together, and we all eat at the table together. I do lots of platter style eating. So platters of different foods and just putting the plates out, and you can serve yourself. Okay, there's no pressure around that. But we talk about what's in the foods and why we need balance. And removing the performance of eating means there's no praise for trying new things. Even though you really want to do that little happy dance when your kid's trying something new and eating it, you've got to just zip it and let it go and just keep putting the foods out. Involving the kids in setting the table, helping with meal preparations has been a really long-term journey. So I've asked this of them since they've been little, and they would ignore me. They would refuse. And I just kept setting it as a standard expectation. So low demand means that I don't get upset or angry if they don't follow through. I just say, dinner's almost ready. Is anyone free to set the table? And eventually they've started stepping up because they want to. They want to help. They want to be involved. They want to share the load. They do. Kids, they always want to um, be a part of something. They want to be supportive. And it fluctuates. Yeah, that it fluctuates is that kids in different moods, kids in different energetic settings, kids in different ages. So yeah, my 13-year-old is definitely stepping back at the moment, but the flow comes in and out. I still ask for help, and they will step up when they are able and wanting. So, um, getting my kids to cook dinner once a week when they feel up to it. So yeah, it's not going to work if they've had a really active day, or they're really tired, or they've got a lot going on, or they're feeling a bit unwell. Taking the pressure away, but saying, hey, are you wanting to make dinner this week? What would you like to make? And making it really something that they want to be doing, giving them back the control, the autonomy. What do you want to make? Bringing that on board. So this is the same sort of thing that we do when we talk about supplements. So this is an important thing to come into when we're looking at PDA kids in clinic. How do we get them to take supplements? How do we get them to do testing? All of this type of thing is that, first off, we don't have to start with any big, elimination diets or anything like that. We are definitely not going to be doing any of that straight off the bat, if at all. So what we're going to be looking at is first off, but when we talk about supplements, let's talk about the clinical picture that I see naturopathically. So if I'm looking at a clinical case of PDA presentation, these are the systems that I would be exploring through a deep dive. And that could be with the parent, with the mom, usually, in a consult, and just having the kid pop in and tell me your experience. What happens when you like this happens in your story? Your mum told me that this has happened, and how do you feel about that? And getting their take on things is important, but they don't have to be there for the whole consult. Often the consult will be the kid popping in and out. Hey, can you come and tell me how you think about this? What do you think's impacting when or happening with your body when this happens in the life or in your day? But most of it's talking with the parents. So the systems that I'll be asking lots of questions about and making sure they've supported would be the nervous system, and their adrenal load is my biggest priority when it comes to PDA cases. So because the nervous system's on high alert, it's probably had chronic threats blasting for a long time. And what happens is that depletes our nutrients rapidly. So I'd be looking at signs of depletion of magnesium, B6, zinc, vitamin C for the adrenals, omega-3s for brain health. So I'd be looking at different connecting systems for these things here, like how the immune system has been impacted by these depletions, how cognitive function has been depleted by these depletions. So these are all regulatory nutrients that the nervous system needs to keep up and stay out of survival mode. So replenishing the kids' reserves of these vitamins and minerals is really vital for regulation. And to be fair, I don't really need to do any testing to know if one of those regulatory nutrients are low. So I'd be just asking lots of questions and then making sure that we can replete them in a way that is fun for kids. There are so many supplements out there now that are really good therapeutic dosages, but also in forms that kids actually want to take. Okay, so we talk about the kids' individual likes. Do they like drinks? Do they like gummies? Do they like powders? Do they like capsules? Do they like liquids? Flavors or no flavors or textures or no textures? It's all very individualized, and we get the right thing for what they need. The other thing that we want to deep dive into is their gut brain connection. So a healthy gut is going to produce 80% of the brain's serotonin, and that's a happiness neurotransmitter. So if your kid is constantly feeling very stressed and emotional and everything feels hard, we're probably looking at a low serotonin balance. If they're very high stressed and very reactive and very explosive, we probably have very excitatory neurotransmitters going off in the brain, and we are not bringing into the switch of calm, which happens with the GABA neurotransmitters for calming, regulating. And the GABA is produced in the gut as well. So if the gut is dysbiotic, which means that the microbiome is imbalanced, then we're going to have an anxious nervous system. And remember, irritable bowel equals irritable brain. So if you're noticing the kid is having some irregular bowel motions, if we're having urgent runny stools or funny tummies, then we need to explore gut health as well. So we ask lots of questions. When it comes to testing, it is really individual. It's going to depend on what spectrum of PDA presentation we've got. Some kids will flat out refuse blood tests. That is okay. We can work around that. So we don't have to start with testing. As I said, I would be starting with nervous system support, replenishing those minerals, the foundational minerals, energetic support like flower essences. I'll speak about them soon. We don't have to dive into testing, especially blood tests straight away. We've got other tests that can look at minerals if we need to, if they've got a high need for testing straight off the bat, if they've got lots of different symptoms coming up that we need to delve into a bit more. Things like a HTMA, which is a hair tissue mineral analysis, is a really low invasion test where we just snip a bit of hair from the back of the head and use the hair sample to test. So this is not painful at all. The other ones that we can look at is like microbiome analysis, which is also not an invasive test. You just collect a little sample of poop and can go from there. So these non-invasive tests that do not hurt, and a lot we can make them fun, we can make them interesting, involve the kid in the process, make it their idea, make it their initiative. Every child's picture is different. I don't have one protocol for this. This is very individualized process. But yeah, we want to know what's happening with magnesium, zinc, B6. We want to know what's happening with their iron, full iron samples like knowing ferritin and transferrin. All of that gets really overlooked in mood and anxiety issues for kids, and it's often coinciding with fussy eaters as well. Vitamin D is also important for mood and immune and nervous system regulation as well. Same as omega-3s, which can come through from picky eating too. So that's really important for inflammation and brain development, neuroinflammation as well. So this can come up with lots of symptoms of different symptoms and issues around neurodivergence and making it more difficult to deal with symptoms of things like ADHD and PDA. We've got herbs are a beautiful way to work with our children, and they don't have to be they're not always the bitter herbs that we do. But these can be really sweet tasting. Really, we work them in glycer tracks for kids. We can put them into gummies. There's lots of beautiful ways that we can use herbs with kids. Teas, really nice ways to do it with beautiful herbs like chamomile and lemon balm. Really calming, soothing, gentle for both the gut and the nervous system. So it's tying both of those systems together. Skull cap is really restorative for the nervous system. Passion flower is anxiolytic, and that's also going to be supporting that GABA pathway that I mentioned. The GABA pathway is about turning on calm in the brain, reducing that high alert hum that keeps driving that chronic feel of threat in the background. And withania, adaptogenic herbs that help our kids adapt to stress. So this is really good if you've been exposed to stress for a long time and you've got a high cortisol load, helping you to drop out of that stress response. So this is all really individual. That's just a handful of herbs that I work with for both nervous system and gut. But there's a huge array, and like I said, it's really independent or really dependent on the individual. So as I mentioned before, sometimes we don't start with any nutrients or herbs because our child is just like a flat out no. One of the favorite things that I will start with is flower essences. So flower essences are a vibrational energy medicine. They work on the emotional and the energetic body. So these are working on the patterns that are underlying that physical presentation. These are the stories that the body lives and reads in order to feel safe and or feel on alert for threats. So I'm looking at what's driving their need for control. What is the nervous system protecting them from? And what is the emotional state that's hiding under that avoidance of demands or expectations? So I use heart radiance flower essences in clinic. So some favorites for this type of presentation might be some sensitive plant. I love heart radiance flower essences because they are plants that are local to this area where I am. They're grown in Mount Nebo, and it's a beautiful place that works really well with the energy of mothers and children specifically. So I like sensitive plant, and I'll use that for the child that feels the world really intensely. So this is that highly sensitive child. They're observing a lot of the emotional energetics of the room, and they need a lot of space to be able to function. So they might get overwhelmed by the crowds. They might get overwhelmed by being around lots of people and new situations. Another one is storm lily, and that's really good for the meltdowns and the stress, so the big explosive energy. So you could use it mid meltdown or afterwards. And this doesn't have to be like, oh, here, take your drops. It can be just popping them in their water bottle and letting them sip on them throughout the day. This is really good for kids who need to go to school, popping them in the water bottle in the morning and just giving it to them to have throughout the day. It helps to keep them regulated. It helps to quiet their heart energy. And it doesn't suppress what needs to be felt. It allows them to be able to take off some layers and feel what needs to be felt with the space to be able to process it. Lamandra is another one. Lamandra, I spoke about this for mothers as well. It's a beautiful essence, but for the child, it's more for the child who's learnt to keep their needs in because it might feel unsafe to express what they really need. And so it helps to build up their self-worth to allow themselves to receive care without feeling like that's another demand. Morning Glory is another essence that I love, and I use this for the child who's going to struggle with routines and rhythms, who's resisting all of those natural structures of the day. The child that really struggles with transitions, Morning Glory is perfect for that. So there's lots of essences. I talk about them more in my blog, but it's really individual. That's why I talk about the story, what's happening in your family, what's the latest story or what's the latest thing that happened, and I can break it down and yes, I will be tuning in with my intuition when it comes to flower essences. They're all very bespoke for every individual. Okay, so I love working with mothers and children in these types of cases. I think it is really important to pay attention to the mother's nervous system because the mother's nervous system needs the capacity to be able to respond to the child's needs, giving them the space or the trust to be able to be able to trial what they need for their own nervous system. We're working with two nervous systems at once here, so we really I'd really like to support them both at the same time. This is why I built the package, the mother child package, where I do an extended consult where I talk about the child's needs and what's going on with your child and what's happening with them and getting all of their needs met. And then I talk about, okay, how about you? What are your needs? What do you need to have the capacity to follow through with this plan? What do you need to have the capacity to be there in the moment while your child is struggling so that you're not melting down on the inside or spiraling? We can get you both sorted in the one session, give you a family plan, and then the returns consults from there are working with both of your needs. So if you are interested in working together with me, then please book a free connection call and we can talk about exactly what your family needs to feel supported. If this has helped you, please give me a great review, like it, share it with a friend, send me a message, let me know what you think. Thanks for tuning in. Lots of love to you. Bye.